Welcome, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the very first of the Jill Dando News Centre interviews that we're holding this term. So a very warm welcome and thank you for giving up your time. It's much appreciated.
Oh, no problem.
So I'm going to hand you straight over to Tamsin, who will start us off. Tamsin, over to you, please.
Hi. So I'm Tamsin, and I'm really interested in STEM subjects, so I'm really excited about this interview. So Jodi, can you tell us a bit about yourself first?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Jodi, and I'm currently a doctoral researcher at King's College London. I'm a neuroscientist by background, so that means that I study the brain in health and in disease. My current research is looking at ALS and dementia, so things that go wrong in the brain, and trying to find ways that we can create new therapies that can try and help people that have these conditions.
So I'm going to do my question first, which is, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
I'm really excited by science, and if you really like STEM subjects as well, then you'll probably understand what that's like. But I think that there are very few jobs where you feel like you're finding new knowledge. So you're finding things that have never been known before. So I find that really exciting. So I think that's probably one of the most rewarding things, knowing that the work I'm contributing to is new. And the other part is actually stuff like this. So we call it outreach or public engagement. So I really enjoy talking to young students who are interested in maybe becoming a scientist, and also members of the public that maybe have dementia themselves or have a family member with dementia, and trying to communicate how important the research is to them.
The first question from other people is from Finn. So Finn, do you want to ask the question?
Hello, my name is Finlay, and my question for you is, how did your family support you when you first told them that this is what you wanted to do?
So I'm very lucky. I have a very supportive family. My mum in particular, I think, is probably my biggest fan. And anyone that she can tell about me, she'll tell about me, whether they care or not, really. So I'm quite lucky. But I'm the first in my family to go to university, so no one before me has gone to college or university. So I think initially it was met with surprise that I had decided to do that and to move away and follow a career that no one in my family had followed. But in general, they're very supportive, even if they don't always understand what I'm doing.
Next, we have Casey.
Hello, my name is Casey. My question is, who or what inspired you to be who you are today?
That's a really nice question. I liked the questions I was sent through before, and I was having a look, and that was one of my favourites. So I think in general, when people are asked this question, you can there's important scientists in history, and you think, wow, I want to be like them. But for me, it was more of a personal thing. So I actually, while I was at college, at the Western College University campus, I worked as a nursing assistant, and I actually worked with patients that have dementia. And so the thing that made me interested in this line of research was working with the patients and their families on a regular basis, and seeing how very little options we have for them and for treatment at the moment. So that kind of led me to thinking, what can I do to change this? So for me, it was seeing the real impact of research.
Next, we have Oscar.
Hi, my name's Oscar, as they've just said, and my question is, what challenges have you got in your research?
So do you mean, hi Oscar, first of all, do you mean the things that I'm trying to fix with my research, or the challenges, the things that I find difficult about my job?
As in, have you come across any bumps in the study that you found have been a problem?
Yeah, so one of the things that you need to know if you want to be a scientist is that things never go right the first time.
Yeah.
And so it does mean that you need to, what we call it is resilience. So it means that sometimes when things go wrong the first time, you need to have the kind of oomph to get up, brush yourself off and try again. And so this has definitely happened a lot so far in my career. So after I left college, I went to university and I did a degree and then I did a master's. And each time you apply for university, that's always difficult because you don't always get in first. And so you always have to kind of go, okay, let's try again. And then since working at King's and doing my research, sometimes experiments don't go right. Sometimes you forget to put a chemical into an experiment and then later you think, well, that's why it didn't work. So yeah, a lot of it is about trial and error and learning how to do things better the next time.
Next we have Megan.
Hi. My question is, did you always want to become a scientist?
Hi Megan, thanks for your question. So actually no. So I think you lot are one step ahead of me so far because you know that you can become a scientist. I feel like when I was your age and I was at school, I didn't really know that a neuroscientist was a job. And that sounds very silly, sitting here as a neuroscientist. But when I was at school, I thought that maybe I'd want to be a medical doctor, so go to medical school or become a nurse. But some of the other things I enjoyed were teaching and writing and reading. So I also liked English subjects. So I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I was at school. So I actually originally did my A-levels with the intention of going to medical school. And I applied for medical school and I didn't get in. So that was my first kind of option A. And I kind of accidentally fell into neuroscience and fell in love with it. So sometimes the path that you think you're going to take is not always the best path necessarily. So yeah, I definitely kind of changed directions at some point.
So I'm going to go to Dawson.
Hi. My question to you is, you've just kind of spoke a bit about it actually, but it's so when you were at school, when did you actually discover that you wanted to be in some kind of STEM sector? Because I know you didn't initially know when you were at school and you decided then, but what age was that at school? Was it influenced by a teacher or someone that you knew that made you realise that you wanted to be a part of this?
Okay, thank you. So I think probably from quite a young age, I knew that I wanted to help people, and I was interested in the medical kind of sciences and healthcare. I have a younger sibling who actually also went to Priory, and she has autism and special needs. So from a young age, I kind of understood that sometimes things go wrong in the brain, and it kind of made me curious about what's happening. So I think for that reason I was probably a little bit more switched on earlier. So I knew that I was interested generally in medicine, but I don't think it was until I was doing my A-levels that I knew I really liked biology.
Now we're going to Ari.
Hi, my question for you is, what is the most interesting part of your job?
Hi Ari, thank you. I think the most important, or most interesting part.
Yeah.
Yeah, most interesting part. So I think, I mean, I'm just really excited by the brain because it's the most complex. It's the most complex organ and it's the most complex thing that we know about. And it's the only organ in your body that has the ability to think about itself, which I was told once by my science teacher, and it kind of stuck with me. So I think I think just the idea that I'm finding more and more things about something that we know very little about is very exciting.
We have Samara.
Hi, my question is, do you think there is enough being done to promote STEM careers for women, and how does it feel being a woman in this field?
Thank you. I really liked this question. I thought it was a really kind of well thought out question and thing that you're thinking about quite early on, which is really important. So I think that in my field, in neuroscience, I'm quite lucky, and I think there are actually quite a lot of women in some branches of biology. So for example, in my lab, my fellow kind of PhD students and researchers, quite a lot of us are female. But I know that in other sectors in STEM, this isn't always the case, especially in kind of technology driven areas and types of engineering. There tends to be less women represented in. So I think that we're doing a lot better now than we were kind of 5 years ago, but there's still a lot more to be done. And that's the reason. So I have a podcast where I actually talk about women in STEM and the issues that we come across and the things that we can do and conversations we need to open up. So this is something that I'm actually really passionate about. So I do think that more and more people are talking about it, but there's definitely a long way to go.
Next, we have Olivia.
Hi Jodi, I've actually got 2 questions for you. One is a bit more of a personal one because I'm looking at sixth forms at the moment around Weston. So
Okay.
what are your views on Weston College and how did you find your experience there?
Yeah, so I went to the Weston College University campus for my A-levels, and I felt I got on really well there. Unfortunately, I was poorly during my second year of A-levels, so I actually had to retake some exams, and I felt like the staff there were really supportive of that decision, and kind of when I was upset that I didn't get my grades the first time around to get into university, they were there to kind of help me piece together what plan B would look like. So I think in general my experience at Weston College has been positive. I also know that some people have gone to the sixth form, I think it's the sixth form with Priory, and had similar experiences there. So yeah, I don't really have anything, I mean I haven't experienced multiple ones, so I have nothing to compare it against, but yeah, in general it was good.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, what really helped to drive you through school, through sixth form and university? Like, what was your kind of get up and go thing?
So I think there was kind of 2 aspects to that. The first one is, as I described, the thing that kind of led me into this area was working with patients with dementia and seeing that there was very little kind of that we could do for them medically. So I think that's definitely a driving factor, because every piece of research that I choose to do has a direct translational effect onto patients in hospitals and in the clinic. I don't work on anything that doesn't have that ultimate what if or so what factor. So that's the first thing, knowing that one day potentially I could make a difference. The other part is a little bit more personal, and I guess it's just that I've always been the kind of person that if I get a grade B, then I want a grade A. If I've got a grade A, I want an A star. If I've got an A star, why am I not top of the class? So I've just always been that kind of person that kind of strives to do better and keep going up that ladder. So I think working in science, and in particular in universities, so in academia, it gives you the opportunity to keep learning. And so I hope I never get to an age where I know everything.
Megan, you can ask your other questions.
Hi. I have another question for you. So, I've heard you want to become a PhD. Is this true?
Yes, so I'm currently a PhD student, and what this means is that for the next 3 years, I need to do some research, and I need to find a piece of information that nobody has ever found before. And if I don't do that, then I don't get my PhD. So if I manage to do that, then I will become a doctor, or a PhD, as some people call it. And then once you've got that, you can then kind of climb up the ladder and keep researching and keep going to bigger and better jobs.
Okay, thank you.
So you say you're hopefully wanting to get a PhD, but once you get that PhD, hopefully, will you strive to go deeper? Will you want to do anything else like that?
Yeah, so normally after you've got your PhD and you become a doctor I'll be a doctor in neuroscience, you can then choose to either stay in academia, so that means working in universities and doing research there, and then you become a group leader. So then you'll have PhD students that you teach and that you train up, and students that come to your lab and you teach them how to be a good scientist. So you can either do that and you can kind of become a professor, which is an expert in your area, or you can choose to go into different jobs. So just because you decide to go into science does not mean that you need to stay as a researcher in a lab. There are lots of things that you can go and do with those qualifications. So from kind of medical writing to outreach, things like this, like public speaking and science communication. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I'm not quite sure which way I want to go yet, but it's nice to know that I've got the options.
Sophie, over to you, please.
Hello. How close do you think we are to finding a cure or a prevention for dementia, as this seems to be a field in which you are doing a lot of your research?
Thank you for your question. So I think it's hard to put a number on a question like that. And as much as I'd like to say, yeah, in 5 years' time, we're going to have a cure, one of the good and bad things about science is that it's unpredictable. And so although we're doing lots of good work that is promising and could lead to lots of important therapies, until we have those results, we don't know whether they're positive or negative. And that's one of the things about working in science, that you could put all of this work into something, and then if your results don't come back the way that you want them, it can sometimes be a bit disheartening. So you then need to kind of be quite creative and think of a new way that you can go. So I'd like to think that in my lifetime or in my career, I'll be able to contribute towards a cure and see some changes, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in the next 5-10 years that we're going to see something as drastic as fixing all dementia, but I just hope that we can kind of alleviate their symptoms and make their quality of life better.
Over to you, Jack, please.
Hi, my question is, as I'm sure you know, we are all about good news here. So do you think this sort of constant looking at bad news has an effect on the brain?
Yeah, so I haven't, obviously my area of research isn't in mental health or anything like that. So there's only so much I can go into that, but I think in general students spend a lot of time, especially at the moment with the pandemic, spending a lot of time looking at a screen, and I know that the effects of the kind of blue light from the screen and stuff like that can affect your brain waves and affect your sleep, give you poor quality sleep, and if you have less sleep, then your mental health isn't as great. So I know that there's that sort of research going on, and then I know that also students or teenagers of a certain age spend a lot of time on social media. I myself spend a lot of time on Instagram and Twitter, you know, scrolling, and that sometimes isn't great for mental health either. So if we can try and kind of limit those things and make sure that we're also doing things that engage our brain, so it's really great to do brain training and things like that. If you've still got a DS, I've still got a DS and Nintendo, I'm old school. You know, doing things like crosswords and things that actually get your brain going rather than just staring at a screen, that definitely has more positive outcomes.
So does Mr. Dando have a question?
Not really. I was going to ask the question that Sophie asked, really, Jodi, and obviously the work you do, it's so worthwhile and rewarding, and I was going to ask, you know, how far down the path you thought you and your colleagues were to understanding all, you know, the causes of dementia, and perhaps more importantly, how to combat them. But I think you probably, that was the sort of question that Sophie asked you, really, and how long's a piece of string, I guess.
I know. I mean, the only thing that I would add, and it's something that's making me hopeful that I'll be able to contribute something during my career, is that previous work on dementia or Alzheimer's disease in particular has been focusing a lot on the brain cells themselves, so the neurons, but inside your brain you've got lots of different types of cells, and up until a certain point neuroscience research has been kind of neglecting these other cells that we thought were not very important. But more research in the last 5 years has shown that they're also very important. So my research is kind of looking at both. It's looking at the brain cells, the neurons, but also looking at these support cells and how they interact together. So looking at something like that, which is looking more at the brain as a whole, I feel is more promising for finding kind of novel therapies that are going to work.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Thanks very much, Jodi.
Thanks. Does Mr. Coles have a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Jodi. Lovely to see you again. Looking
Hiya.
great, and thank you for taking part in this. Really appreciate it. Fantastic. Jodi, what advice would you give to someone, let's say in year 10 or year 9 at school, who we're finding the going tough, let's say, and they're bright kid, bright student, peer pressure impacts, doesn't it, on people? What would you say to the students on here who may, be bright students, but their peers are saying, no, you need to go and do this, do that, but not really follow that, maybe academic, maybe enjoy reading, like you said. Is there any advice that you'd give to these kids that would help, do you think, or is it just, part of growing up and we just have to say it's what it is and try to support students as best we can in schools? What would you say to that, and any advice?
Yeah, so I think when I was at school, I was quite nerdy, a bit of a bookworm, but I also, as you can probably tell, quite like to chat. And so if I ever got in trouble in classrooms, it was probably because I was chatting too much. So I think my answer would be balance. So although it's very important to study and work hard and make sure that you put 100% in at school, because getting good grades at school leads on to better opportunities at college and then at university and so on. It all has a knock-on effect. So the earlier you can start working towards a goal, the better. But the other end of that, and it's something that I'm really passionate about still now, even while I'm working, is this work-life balance. And so it is still really important, especially right now, while we're maybe not able to see family and friends like we'd like to. It is still really important to have that social aspect and to have friends and to have a support network, and have time where you're focusing on your well-being and you're doing things that aren't work related or aren't school related. So I think it is about balance, and I think it's about remembering that you're still very, very young, and although it feels like you should know exactly where you're going and you should have a plan put well together right now, it's about doing your best in the circumstances that kind of present to you, and I promise that even if plan A doesn't work out, plan B, plan C, I promise that as you kind of get older and you find out the things that you enjoy and you don't enjoy, they all kind of slot into place. So please do not stress yourself so much at your age to kind of know exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it.
Jodi, if you don't mind me just butting in, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to see like an ex-student sort of on the cutting edge of science, really. And I just wondered, you mentioned resilience, which I think is one of those really important factors that we often try and build into school life here at Priory and across the trust. I just wondered, are there any other core values or core skills that you think are important, whether you're a scientist or not?
Yeah, so I think as well as resilience, I think confidence comes into it as well, because and they do kind of interplay, because when you come up against barriers or problems that you need to tackle, it's not only having the kind of energy to try again and to try new ways of flexible thinking, but it's also having the confidence in yourself that you can do it. So I know that in science subjects, but also in other areas, people who are very qualified at their jobs and have been doing it a long time still feel like they're not very good and they have like this low self-confidence. So I think as well as putting time into your education, you should also put that time into your self-esteem and your confidence, and kind of acknowledge the things that you've achieved. And the way that I do this, I actually have a Word document on my computer that says open in case of confidence crisis or something like that, and it basically just bullet points all of the good things that I've done so far in my life, or it could be in the last year, it could be the last 5 years, whatever you like. And it's sometimes really good because you're constantly chasing the next thing. You've got the next homework assignment or the next deadline, and sometimes in all that busyness, it's good to just take a moment and take a kind of stop check on the things that you've achieved and the things that you do already have, the qualities that you have. So yeah, I guess that's the only other thing that I'd say is important, not just in science, but I guess general life advice.
Definitely. Thank you. That's a great tip. Thanks.
Yeah, Samara.
So I'm currently in sixth form, and I was wondering if you could give me any advice to succeed in A levels.
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is organisation. And I know you've probably been told this by your teachers and your tutors, that you need to be organised, but sometimes it's hard to know what that looks like for you. So my kind of top tip is to factor in non-school things. So I used to find it really difficult if I had factored in 8 hours of revision on a day, and then my mum saying, oh, you need to tidy your room, you need to help wash up, and then I think I can't, I've got 8 hours of work to do today. So I think it's important to you know, your life is not just school. It's very important, but you do have other things that you need to do in your day and in your week. So you need to be realistic about the to-do list of each day, so that you can feel like you can check those off and you feel productive. So yeah, when you're kind of planning your revision timetable or your studying timetable, just make sure that you're factoring regular breaks and all the other things, the extracurricular things around your workload.
Thank you.
Mr. Dean, I think you had a question.
Yeah, hi, Jodi. I too am fascinated about the brain. I know very little about it apart from some fascinating facts, but is it true that we only use 10% of our brain capacity? And secondly, what's your most fascinating fact about the brain that you've discovered in all the years you've been reading things?
Thank you. So the kind of only using 10% of your brain thing is a bit of a myth, unfortunately. I mean, or fortunately, depending on which way that you're looking at it. All of your brain is useful, and that is something that we've learned in the last kind of, especially in the last 5-10 years, as I said, as we start looking at other different cells in the brain as well. But yeah, you read things that say, oh, you take this supplement, then you'll increase your brain, you'll use another 2% of your brain. I think that it's not quite as simple as that. So yeah, all of your brain is useful. You use all of your brain. It's just that different parts of your brain have different jobs, so some are more important than the other. And what was the other question, sorry? My most important fact, or my most interesting fact?
Fascinating fact. The thing that's made you go wow more than any other about the brain, going, I really didn't know that.
I think, I mean, it's a little bit nerdy. I don't know if it's gonna I don't know if it's gonna excite you as much as it excites me, but I guess it's I mean, I've always been interested in the brain, and brain research looks solely at the brain by itself. But recently I've been more interested in the brain and the gut interaction. And it's not something, I mean, although we're kind of a whole organism, and obviously all of our organs and all of our systems interact with one another, I think because during my neuroscience degree and my master's training, you look directly at the brain and at the nervous system. So I think the thing that made me think wow was, especially in Alzheimer's disease, there seems to be a relationship between the gut and your diet and the way that you digest things directly with the brain and inflammation and the way that the disease progresses. So that sort of research I find really interesting.
Wow, I mean, that's fantastic. And finally, very quickly, is there anything we can do as in our work and also as students that will really help our brain work to better capacity on a day-by-day basis? Maybe something we could eat, or something that we could do, or something we could not do?
So the first one is to make sure that you're getting plenty of good quality sleep. So you can sleep 10 hours a day, but if it's rubbish sleep, then it's as if you slept 2. And the way that you can make sure that you're sleep cycle is healthy is by limiting the amount of screen time, which I know is really difficult, and I'm saying this on the other end of a screen, so it's somewhat hypocritical, but to try and limit how much kind of false light and screen light that you let into your eye during the day, because that will improve your quality of sleep. The second one is drink lots of water. And have a balanced diet, because obviously the different nutrients that we get from our diet impact on the different chemicals and things in our brain, so that's really important. And yeah, the other one is just taking regular breaks. So I think our attention span is now shorter than a goldfish. So a goldfish has the attention span of 8 minutes, and research in the last 2 years has shown that humans' attention span is now 6. And that's because of things like social media and scrolling and fast access to information on Google. So I would just try and improve your attention span, whether that be looking at bite-sized information and taking regular breaks, looking at the way some people are kinetic learners, so that means that they learn by seeing or by doing. Others are visual learners. So if you can find out which way you learn best, then you'll kind of make sure you're taking full advantage of that very short attention span.
I have one more, sorry. You're doing STEM research, and have you found multiple different cells? And if so, like what different cells have you found, and what different cells do you use, etc.?
So before I started my PhD, I was a research assistant at King's College London. So the job is very much the same, it just has a different title, basically. So I was still working in the lab, but I used to work with fruit flies, so very, very small flies, and on your hand, they're like a little pen dot, very, very small. And I used to use a microscope to dissect their brain, so very, 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 very small objects. So I used to use cells from a fly brain for most of my research in that project. I'm now working with human cells. So it's a cell line that we're using, that we freeze and we thaw them as we use them. And I've started doing that only a couple of weeks ago, because this is for my new project. So I'm still learning how to do those things.
My friend Isabel, who couldn't get on the meeting, has just told me her question. I don't know whether we've had something similar, but it's what do you enjoy most about your job, or what is the most interesting thing that happened whilst you've been working in your field?
So I've kind of answered the first bit about the thing I find interesting, because I love science and I love doing things like this, talking to you lot. So that's that part. The most interesting thing that's happened so far is, and actually I'm writing a paper on it currently, is in my work with the flies, I found something new. So I can't tell you too much about it, because it's a secret until I get the paper out. But looking at ALS, which is another condition that affects the brain and the movement of the body, I was able to find a gene, so a gene in your DNA that affects the flies in a different way that we didn't know about. So I think that's really exciting, actually finding something that we didn't know before.
But thank you so much for your time today. It's been, really appreciated. Lots of positive top tips for us as well.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brilliant.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Well done.